Welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about border security today. We're going to talk about the crisis on the border that this administration refuses to acknowledge as a crisis. I'm going to have my friend on, Mark Morgan, forming Acting Commissioner of CBP, 2019 to right till the end of the Trump administration. Mark, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks, Congressman, for having me. I appreciate it. It's a very critical topic for our country.
Mark, I was just down at the border this weekend. It's especially in Starr County, the Rio Grande Valley area being hit especially hard right now. They're worried this is going to quickly spread to the rest of the southern border as well. You know, from your view and from your contacts, I'm sure you still got a lot of friends in the Border Patrol. What are you seeing? And let's start with the 30,000-foot view.
Yeah, so first of all, it's a crisis. Let's go back to former Secretary Jay Johnson. I was chief of the Border Patrol at that time, working under Jay Johnson, and he said 1,000 was a bad day. Trust me, and 1,000 apprehensions was a bad day. And we're looking right now at between 4,500 to 5,000 a day. I know we're really focused on unaccompanied minors, and those numbers have skyrocketed as well, but so have the overall numbers. You're going to see in February, when they finally allow CBP to release the numbers, is in excess of 100,000 people that were apprehended trying to illegally enter the country. 6,000 in custody. Just real quick in perspective, in 2020, we had less than 500 in detention. Now they're at 6,000. Over 3,000, almost half of those are unaccompanied minors. That's what we have on the border, and it's overwhelmed. And just like happened in 2019, till we got a handle on it, as predicted, HHS, who takes the unaccompanied children, they're already overwhelmed. They're backlogged. And so now the children are sitting in Border Patrol facilities where they shouldn't belong, well in excess of 80 hours. I could keep going on.
Right.
Every single measure of success, it's a crisis.
Yeah, it's a crisis. There's too many people. Look, I mean, everybody wants to overcomplicate it sometimes. The simplest way to talk about this is there's too many people coming across a border. Like if there was too many people coming through customs at an airport, you would be overwhelmed. And and if some of those people weren't even supposed to be there, they didn't have their passports. I mean, where would you put them? Right? There's not enough offices. Like if there's thousands and thousands, like it's common sense. There's too many people. We will never be able to handle it correctly. The Biden administration is learning that now, right? It was easy to cast stones at the Trump administration when you had to build these extra structures, put kids in holding facilities, and so-called. My always question is like, well, what else is the alternative? You either just let them go. Are you going to pay for their hotel room? Would you want hard-sided structures instead of cage-like structures where there's no airflow and you can't see if somebody's getting hurt or assaulted? The conversation's utterly ridiculous. But let's go back as to, maybe some history lessons for people. We covered this a lot 2 years ago. I think most people have forgotten. Haven't done a border security podcast in a while. So let's walk through what caused the crisis 2 years ago. What caused the initial crisis in 2014? I mean, before that, look, we'd always had open borders. It was frustrating, but it really got bad in 2014. It really got to an unsustainable number in 2014. So help us in layman's terms understand why all that happened.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I think it's important for the American people to have that kind of history. In 2014, DACA, it's that simple. And I still believe DACA was unlawful, unconstitutional. That's what started the crisis, the first wave of unaccompanied children. Because with DACA, the Dreamers now, if you came, it was an incentive, right, to come here illegally, and then you were going to be allowed to stay. And then a couple of things happened, right? The Flores Settlement Agreement, we call it the FSA, Judge G. This is very, very important because on top of DACA, then we have the Tvpra, which is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which basically says that if you're an unaccompanied minor from a non-contiguous country, i.e. outside Mexico or Canada, and you come here, we have to keep you. If you're from Mexico or Canada, we send you back. So both of those things started to coalesce in 14 and 15. And so we started to see this wave of the unaccompanied minors come in. And then Flores Settlement Agreement came in. And that's where they said that we cannot keep unaccompanied children for more than 20 days. It's impossible to get through the immigration process in 20 days. So that meant if you're an unaccompanied minor, you were free, never be heard from again. First wave. Then the Florida Settlement Agreement was reinterpreted in 1516 to also apply to families. So then we saw the unaccompanied minors start to go down because now they didn't need to come across by themselves. They could just form a family, and now they were let in. Again, according to the Florida Settlement Agreement, we could not keep children or families for more than 20 days. That meant that they were released. And by 2019, fast forward, that's where we were at. That was a genesis of the crisis. So it's not just about the numbers, because Congressman, a lot of people will go back to the late 90s, early 2000s and say, oh, we had well over 1 million at that time. Well, first of all, almost 98% were single adult males, most of them Mexican citizens, and we were able to remove them quickly. By 2019, because of what had transpired over the previous few years, we were seeing families and unaccompanied minors. So that demographic, our system was not designed for that. Our system was designed for single adult males, and that really what led to the crisis.
Right, and that's the thing people need to understand. You could have 100,000 crossings in a day. If they're all single adult males, most of them will pretty much get removed. There's a process for that. But if they're all kids, it's an entirely different story. And the cat's out of the bag, right? They know how to leverage our immigration system. They know what the Flores settlement is. They know exactly what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And if they don't know, then drug cartels will tell them, right? I mean, don't they
right.
They use social media and actually spread the word?
You're spot on. That's another. I'm really frustrated right now with this administration, because not only do I feel they're spinning and intentionally misleading, in some cases they're blatantly lying to the citizens of this country. But you're spot on, and that's why their whole now "pretty please don't come yet" is just a joke and it's absurd. The cartels and smugglers, they have put them back in business. Look, with the rhetoric during the campaign, they already started kind of convincing the migrants to come and coaching them. And now, once he won the election, and then obviously he started to remove all the policies, after Biden took over. Of course, they're using that to exploit the migrants, exploit our loopholes, and they're not stopping, because their business is back on. It's a booming business for the smugglers right now, and they're laughing all the way to the bank as their bank accounts are being filled on the backs of the migrants and at the cost of our national economic security, in my opinion.
So I'm sure you're familiar with this part of the border, the Salinas Crossing. It's in Roma in Starr County, Texas, and we were there, and was looking over this bluff at the Mexican town just across the way, where I'm told that two rival drug cartels are constantly battling each other. You can hear automatic weapons fire going off every once in a while, and they're battling for this spot because it's very lucrative. It's a very lucrative crossing area, and for about $300 per person, they call it a piso. It's just it's a fare that you have to pay the drug cartels in order to be allowed to get on that raft and come across. And after about 6-7 p.m., you'll see dozens of rafts coming across all throughout the night. I was there this past weekend, and they told me as soon as I left, they had about 9 rafts almost right away. They apprehended about 50-something people right away within a couple hours of me leaving. I mean, it just starts right away. And this is at zero risk to the drug cartels. It's almost better than smuggling drugs in some ways. Well, in a couple ways, right? For one reason, because it distracts Border Patrol. So then they can smuggle the actual drugs they want to.
Right.
And the second reason, it's zero risk, right? The drug cartels just stay on the other side. They have zero chance of getting caught. All they have to do, charge that piso, and tell anybody who was crossing on that raft to walk, in this case, what is about 50 to 100 meters to where Border Patrol basically just waits every night and starts processing people. But you know what they don't get to do when they're processing people? Actually patrol the border.
Congressman, everything you just said is absolutely spot on. Every word. I can't add anything to it. I couldn't have said it better. And one of the issues there is because you've been to the border, you've watched it, you're talking to Border Patrol, you're actually seeing the reality and the truth.
Well, maybe exactly you can answer. Maybe you can add something to it. How does this demoralize our Border Patrol agents? I mean, why are they even bothering? Honestly, why bother?
That's exactly right. And this is the horrible part, because what you saw in 2019 was, we had a capacity of about 4,000 to 5,000, and we had 20,000 at one time. These Border Patrol agents, they're mothers, they're fathers. When they see these kids coming across, and they know, Congressman, they know it was our laws, the loopholes in our laws, that were incentivizing and encouraging these individuals to risk their lives. You're right. I keep saying the cartels treat these migrants like pieces of garbage. They couldn't care less. In fact, they're changing their tactics. They'll tell somebody, hey, you know what? We'll give you a 3-for-1. We'll the same fee, but we'll give you 3 attempts, because they're locking the border down tighter. I mean, they change and adapt. Right. And again, it's all about making money. But the Border Patrol agents, they're demoralized right now. I just got an email from a longtime Border Patrol agent that said, hey, sir, look, there's a lot of people that are getting ready to retire, even though they're not mandatory, because they know what's coming. Look, 6,000 in custody. Again, 2020, at one point, we had 500, and 3,000 of them are unaccompanied minors. These are deplorable conditions. This should not be happening, especially in the middle of COVID. And this is all preventive. And look, I don't want to, I keep, quoting former President Trump, but at CPAC, he was right. He was absolutely right when he said this was a self-inflicted wound.
100%.
Right now, right? I mean, Congressman, while we're still trying to get kids back to school and businesses open and people back to work, and now's the time you're going to open the borders.
So let's talk about let's talk policy now, what President Trump did, because look, this crisis happened under his watch too, but then it improved to an enormous extent. So what was going on? I mean, well, we've already kind of gone over why it happened in 2019. Basically, the same situation we have now. But then Trump fixed it. I mean, the migrant protection protocols, the Remain in Mexico policy wasn't around back then. Our agreements with the Northern Triangle countries weren't around back then. Explain what those are, why they're so effective, and what Title 42 is also. And explain why we basically did get control of the border over the last 2 years.
So 3 things essential prior to COVID, and then after COVID, Title 42 I'll talk about. 2 of them were policies, and then 1, though, was the unprecedented cooperation with our partners. So let's talk about MPP, the Migrant Protection Protocols, or the Remain in Mexico, as the media refers to it. That was the single-handed most effective, game-changing policy, because one of the biggest incentives by 2019 that look, and this is not a right or left thing, it's just the truth, is that President Trump inherited this broken immigration system. By 2019, it was at its height. If you grabbed a kid, that was your ticket in the United States. It was that simple. It was not complicated. We had kids being bought, sold, and rented. We've talked about that before. Again, 2019, grab a kid, you're in. So what the Migrant Protection Protocol did was it removed that incentive. So instead of being released in the United States, as we were mandated under the Florida Settlement Agreement, the MPP allowed us to remove the individuals to Mexico while they still wait and receive the most high level of due process that any country on the face of the planet gives somebody that's illegally entering their borders. So they were still getting the due process, but what we were taking away was their goal to be released into the United States. That policy single-handedly what led to the end of catch and release. So the other thing,
let's stick to that one for just a second.
Sure.
I've heard that only about 10% of people who apply for asylum actually end up meeting the asylum requirement, and that's a long process in and of itself. So, it seems to me that once you get a feeling for what you have to say to claim asylum, everybody's just going to say it, right? And that's exactly what happens.
That's exactly right. In fact, Border 12 recovered like little cue cards, like I used to use this to study for tests in college, right? That actually told them what to say to get past the credible fear, the initial credible fear standard, which is no standard at all, which is another thing I've been asking Congress to fix. You're exactly right. They come in, they say literally the magic words. They can read it from a card. Boom. Yeah. They're entered into the system. And here's what's important. There's a combination, because on the open border applicants, the Democratic side, they like to twist this around when we say, about 10% are really valid. There's an important double impact here. Look, they either, once they're released into the United States, they either don't show up at all for the hearings, or those that do, once they receive a final order removal, they don't comply with it.
Exactly. Together, and that because you hear this, can we debunk this statistic real quick? Yeah. I think I know what the debunk is, but I want to run it by you. You've probably heard it before. Democrats will always say like over 90% of people show up for their hearings. You know, it's just not true that they just come back. So I believe they're referring to a very specific pilot study, right?
Well, there's two things. So they're referring to a DOJ pilot study where they put families at the front of the line that entered at a certain point, right? But here's where they're absolutely, in my opinion, intentionally misleading.
And I think though that they had ankle bracelets on too. It's a pilot study where they're literally being tracked.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a joke too, because as soon as they get a final order of removal, they cut them off, right? So they call ATD alternatives to detention. Doesn't work. It's a joke. So what they mean is what happens is there is a good a segment that show up for their initial hearing. Yeah. That's important. Their initial hearing. And that's the stat that they're using. They're intentionally misleading the American people, because then after that initial hearing, they either don't show up for the remaining hearing and they get an order of removal and abstention, or the very few that continue through the whole process, again, once they get a final order, they don't comply.
Right.
So that's where we get that once you illegally enter, 90% stay in the country illegally. Okay.
I just wanted to hammer that one home because look, we get so many sort of false claims. And I think the Democrats have this idea that if there's a caravan of people coming, then they must have an asylum claim. And you're like, it's really the opposite, frankly. If you have an organized caravan, it should be pretty obvious that asylum claims are pretty obviously not, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. They're not true. Okay, so what was...
And here's a really important part of it. Again, facts. Look, we interview all of them, and it's clear from their own words, the majority of them are coming for two major reasons. One, to get a job, and two, reunite with family that's already here illegally. I mean, that's just the truth. And the Democrats, they constantly lie about that.
Right. And like, it doesn't make them bad people, like the people coming, right? I'm not, I think this was wrong with Republican messaging for a short period of time. These aren't bad people necessarily, but they are cutting the line. You know who else isn't bad people? Other legal immigrants who do it the right way. I mean, there's a moral case to be made here. And also the other thing I get frustrated about the asylum process is, look, there's a geographic advantage that is very unfair to the rest of the world, right? Our asylum process is meant for true persecuted individuals everywhere, not just south of our border. And that system is completely clogged up by people falsely claiming to be eligible for asylum. All right, but I interrupted that train of thought on what Trump did.
So three things. So one, we covered MPP. The other was the ACAs, the Asylum and Cooperative Agreements, because here was another big loophole in our system, was forum shopping. If you think about it, the international standard, Congressman, because I've heard you talk and you get this, is that you should seek, and we should encourage people that have valid asylum claims to seek relief and assistance in the first country they can. That just makes sense. It's common sense.
If it was valid, it would make sense, right? If it was a valid claim, you would go because you would be running away. You would go to the first U.S. consulate or embassy that you could find because it's that dangerous. I mean,
correct. Right? And that's what we should be encouraging. We should be encouraging those that have a valid asylum claim to seek relief and assistance in the first safe third country they can. That was the genesis of the ACAs, because what we saw, because we know the majority of claims are false and they're forum shopping with their ultimate goal is to get to the United States to get a job, the ACAs stopped that. We had MPP on top of the ACAs, and it was extremely effective.
Did these ACAs, did we have American resources in like Guatemala, Honduras? Did we have American resources down there, like immigration judge, or was that an idea that at least came up, or that way it would be great if we could adjudicate those claims right then and there?
Yes, so it's funny. So let me get to that. But but the resources. So we did have resources there for advice and counseling and guidance. We helped them set up their systems. Absolutely. And that wasn't just CBP or DHS. That was really a whole government approach. Yeah. Of course, Department of State, USAID. I mean, just a lot of agencies that were embedded in the Northern Triangle countries that really truly, that part was a fairly effective whole government approach to really system to get them set up to be able to support the ACAs. But to your other point, though, is yes, we were talking about that. We just couldn't quite get that across the line. Is that hey, look, if you believe you have a valid claim, Hey, go to the consulate right there in your home country, make the application right there immediately and have it adjudicated. That's something we were working towards. I think that's a healthy, viable solution.
Yeah, that'd be a good
yeah.
a good investment. So what was the third thing?
Right. So we had MPP and ACA, and by February of 2020, the flow had been reduced by 75%. But here's another important, the third element pre-COVID, right? There's a lot more other stuff, but these are the key ones. Is truly, and I've said this a lot, Congressman, is the unprecedented cooperation with Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries. First of all, those ACAs, never in the history had we had agreements like that. At the same time, we're down there helping with their infrastructure, right? To help the flow of goods in and out of their ports. We're helping beef up their national security within their countries. And then let's move to Mexico. Again, unprecedented cooperation with Mexico. We saw at one point over 25,000 law enforcement and military personnel that were dispatched to handle the illegal immigration crisis. They beefed up their interior security and they beefed up their southern border security. All of that combined, we really were attacking this for the first time ever as a regional crisis that it was, and it was effective. And just one stat, and there's so many, but one stat. In 2019 at the height, we were seeing 40 to 50 large groups per month. 40 to 50. I think in El Paso, one was 1,000. A single caravan, 1,000. In 2020, zero.
Wow, really?
Right.
Yeah.
And now under the Biden, they've already, I think I stopped the last count. It was like 15, 16 large groups of 100 or more they've already experienced in the last 6-7 weeks.
And part of that is COVID, Title 42. I don't want to spend a lot of time on Title 42 because it's a temporary, just shot in time. But it gave us a lot of ability to just turn people back because of COVID restrictions. That's what Title 42 is, right?
It is, but here's why it's important right now, though, right? And one, it shows hypocrisy. Two, it shows that I believe that the press secretary continues to lie to the American people. Here's the hypocrisy part of Title 42. So they've ended the reign of Mexico, in large part because they said it's inhumane to send people back to Mexico that are applying for asylum. But yet, Congressman, that's exactly what they're doing under Title 42. That's their dirty little secret, right?
Yeah.
So if it's under the known remain in Mexico policy, it's not good to send them back to Mexico. But if it's under Title 42, it's okay to send them back to Mexico, including families. So that's the first.
I mean, that's the thing about dishonest arguments. It's easy to find contradictions. So, but it's also important to distinguish for people the difference between there's just effectively two types of illegal immigration. There's sort of your economic migrants. And again, in many cases, if they have a kid with them, they just turn themselves in because they know that, going up to Border Patrol is like literally part of their journey. Even if we tried to ignore them and said, I don't see you, I don't know that you're an illegal immigrant, go right ahead. They would be like, no, I need to come through you. I need to turn myself in because how else am I going to get a bus ticket? And how are we going to get some food and some water cleaned up? We've I've heard from so many border agents. Yeah, they took an Uber here. They took an Uber to the border station to turn themselves in because it's actually become part of their process. So there's that kind of migrant. Again, now single adults in that situation actually are trying to get away because they think they rightfully think they'll probably be deported right away. But then there's the other side of it, which is the real bad guys. I mean, the guys who definitely don't want to get caught, more sophisticated, smuggling drugs, smuggling fentanyl. I heard a horrible story, but they found 20 pounds of fentanyl on one guy recently in South Texas. That's like enough to kill the entire country.
Yep, that's right.
It's insane.
That's right.
And so, when it comes to that type of border security, it's a totally different ballgame. All right, that's where the wall comes in. That's where the technology comes in. That's where, right. Texas DPS comes in because Border Patrol has become humanitarian processors, and now you need Texas DPS to fill the gaps. So talk to us about the wall a little bit, because that was a big subject a couple of years ago, and Biden immediately paused construction. When I was down there, I see all these half-finished border walls. I thought it was really hilarious on one particular border wall, exactly where it ends, and you could obviously just walk right around it. There's a stop sign in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, it's like they built irony right into the wall. It was great. So, just give
Yes.
us an idea of what walls do and what they don't. An honest discussion about how their effectiveness.
Yeah. So first of all, again, everyone listening to this needs to understand everything you just said is completely correct. It's absolutely spot on. Especially, I'll add one thing to that is that what happens too when we see the number of unaccompanied minors and families increase. Again, common sense. Border Patrol then are pulled off the line, what I call to do their national security job, to really do the daycare providing. Again, we're in the middle of insanity because we saw the exact same in 2019. We told the Biden administration this is exactly what would happen. So now there's wide swaths of the border now that are open for that criminal activity to come in. But let's talk about the wall. So again, I think we also did a bad job of messaging, quite frankly, because we got brought into this trap that our borders was all about illegal immigration, about the just those individuals looking for a better life. It's just not true. That there is an enormous amount of people that are bad that are getting through. I'm not saying that the families and the kids coming across are bad people. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, the truth is, though, is bad people, criminals, are making their way to our border and getting past us every single day. On an average, CBP alone apprehends 1,000 gang members, just gang members. You add on thousands of other people that have convictions that have been either charged or convicted of crime. Those are all facts. That's not hyperbole. And now the wall, and this is what we've said all along, is that the wall is an integral part of the multi-layer strategy of infrastructure, technology, and personnel. We've never said the wall was the end-all to be-all. We've never said the wall was the only tool. But when you apply that infrastructure, the wall, as part of that multi-layer strategy, along with personnel, along with technology, the data historical analysis shows everywhere along the Southwest border you apply that, every measure of success has improved. Illegal immigration has gone down. Drugs in that area have gone down. Apprehension of criminal agents have gone down. Assaults on agents and officers have gone down. It's just a fact, and we can show that. And so when you, and again, if you think about it, it goes back, so much of this is common sense. If you build a 30-foot tall wall, right, with integrated lighting, access roads, and technology,
it's really hard to get over.
It's like going to a parking lot, a car thief going to a parking lot. What are you going to do? You're going to steal a car that's locked or one that's open?
Right. And yeah, I mean, people are like, oh, you just climb over it or you just cut through it. Well, okay. You need special equipment to cut through that thing. I'm not saying it's impossible, but, and a sophisticated drug cartel can do it. But, it's a lot easier if they just drive over. I mean, and then you're definitely not going to catch them. I mean, because with some motion sensors, with some cameras, I mean, you'll get to if somebody's getting a buzzsaw and cutting through it, you can get to them. Climbing over that is not, you need special equipment to climb over these things because they have these, people have seen it, right? There's sort of a flat area on top. You can kind of shimmy your way up. We call it anti-climb plate. Yeah.
Anti-climb plate. And Congressman, again, you're spot on. Look, we've always said, again, part of that multi-layer strategy, but then again, of the wall itself, just the wall, we've never said it was foolproof. We said, though, it was just what it is, an effective impedance and denial tool. So at times what it does is it's going to deter some from trying to do it, and others that do, it's going to slow them down enough so that we can respond. So either it's going to stop some, the others is going to slow them down enough for us to get there. And look, here's a really measure of success. And the Democrats and open border advocates really like to use this as a negative. And I just laugh. They're like, well, they're just going to fly over and go under it. Yep. That tells me the wall is freaking working.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, and it takes that's an enormous amount of resources to do that. Like right. It's not some simple thing. The entire point is mitigation, just from a security standpoint. And they're like, well, they go around it, right? Because you can't unless it's completely contiguous. Yeah, I get that, but that also allows Border Patrol to focus resources.
That's
it's a tool.
Right.
It's a tool. It's just a very, very common sense.
Well, and one last thing on that, what you just said is spot on, is that we keep trying to do this. Well, instead of right now where we're at is that the cartels shape our behavior. With the more infrastructure and technology and personnel that we have as part of that multi-layer strategy, we become offensive in nature and we get to shape their behavior. And I know from your military experience, you fully understand that. Yeah. Ultimately, what we wanted to do, if we had the wall and that technology and personnel all along the Southwest border we needed, our goal was to funnel them where? To our POEs, where we are completely offensive and have the ability to stop.
Claim asylum at the actual point of entry. Like that, that's a crazy thought. And we could have, a processing system there. Because right now it's like, well, we have to have basically a school bus going around literally all over the border, driven by our border agents. I mean, our border agents, instead of national security enforcement officers, are bus drivers. It's ridiculous.
That's it. And I call them daycare providers. I still remember going to RGV, which was then and still is the epicenter. Well, I walked in there and I called them mini Costco's.
Yeah.
I mean, you had baby formula, baby diapers. You had brand new clothes from toddler all the way to 18. I could go on.
They have different sizes. Yeah. No, that's true. I've toured it. Okay. So what did Biden do differently? On day one, he removed the Remain in Mexico policy. This stuff's a little complicated, so I'm just going to summarize it real quick. It is. Remain in Mexico or migrant protection protocols, exact same thing. The cooperation agreements with the Northern Triangle countries. What this amounts to is international agreements that get our asylum processing under control. Okay, that's fundamentally what we're doing with those particular policies. They just say, look, just because you show up and read from a cue card doesn't mean you have an asylum case. All right, we want to encourage you to either do it in your own country or, hey, that's fine. You claim asylum, wait here in a safe area while we adjudicate it. Now, when people hear that, they're like, wait, I don't just get released into the country.
Exactly.
Well, there's a disincentive to come in. If there's an open invitation that says, okay, not only, if you just read from the cue card, come right in, get released into the interior, here's your bus ticket, here's a COVID test. That's a whole other problem, by the way. Hundreds of COVID positive people being put on buses and put anywhere they want. But huge incentive to come in. As long as you have a kid with you, you will be good. Okay, so Biden ripped up these international agreements. Not only that, he paused deportations. I want you to talk about that. And he also, another executive order said, hey, all of you who were remaining in Mexico and awaiting your adjudication, you basically have a visa now. That's exactly what he said. He said, you can now await inside the United States. That's equivalent to a visa. You just gave about what I believe is about 30,000 people, I've been told, we don't have an exact number there, a visa to cut the line in front of literally everybody else. Why? Because you dared to cross our border illegally. This is so immoral and unfair to legal immigrants who wait years to get visas.
Yeah. Congressman, again, everything you said, I couldn't have said it better myself. I'll go a step further. I believe it's unconstitutional. I think it's counter to the oath of office for this president to protect our borders and secure this country. It's unconscionable on so many levels. But you're right. I'll go even a step further on NPP. Not only did they stop new enrollees in NPP, but then they're given visas. I think I'm going to use that from now on. I think that's correct way to put it. Visas to those that were already enrolled. And they're even going a step further. They're having conversations about actually directing DHS to go and find people in their home country that were previously removed under MPP and bring them back. It's absolutely absurd.
It's like they feel like they owe them something.
It's absurd for violating our laws. I mean, for me, look, I've been doing law enforcement for 30 years. So talk about just kind of ingrained in kind of common sense for me is it's about the rule of the law. We have borders for a reason. We're a sovereign nation for a reason. We have laws for a reason. I would think we should all, as a country, who cares whether you're right or left, it doesn't matter. We should all be unified in the basic fundamentals of a successful civilized society, and that is getting behind the rule of law. And we're encouraging, incentivizing, facilitating people to break that now every single day. But here's what's important. So that's what's happening on the front end. What I've been saying now is we basically created reception centers on the front end. And then they know, as we talked before, the majority either don't show up for their hearings or when they get a court order removal, they don't comply. Here's what's important, though. So what are they doing on the back end through White House directed DHS guidance? They've removed 90% of ICE's enforcement authority.
Yeah.
So today, the very people that they're letting in, they know aren't going to show up. And then on the back end, they're preventing ICE from deporting them. So we've created reception centers on the front end and a sanctuary country on the back end. That's where we're at right now.
Go into a little bit more detail on that, on the pause on deportations and what ICE can and can't do and how that's different from a few months ago.
So to try to walk through how it's different, we don't have enough time. Every fathomable way it's different. And here's what I'll say, and this is not hyperbole. A lot of people want to dismiss it as, but this is not. It's in their memo. They bullet it out. But I'm trying to make it simplified. look, unless you're a known or suspected terrorist or convicted aggravated felon, you are basically off limits for ICE. And then they threw in.
And if you're convicted, shouldn't you already be in jail anyway? It's like.
So that's key. That's right. That's very important. So I just talked to a bunch of sheriffs a couple of weeks ago, and so we were talking back and forth. There's this program called 287G, which allows sheriff's departments to work with ICE to facilitate if they apprehend an illegal alien for a crime. They call ICE and they work together to remove them. Wow, imagine that. Law enforcement agencies working together to enforce our laws. But here's what's happening. Sheriff's Department now, and look, I could give you 1,000 examples, and this is not hyperbole. They arrest a known gang member who they discover is an illegal alien. In fact, they discover that he has multiple illegal entries back and forth, and they've arrested him and charged him with, burglary from a motor vehicle. They call ICE up and say, we have a known gang member, has multiple illegal entries. We just arrested him for burglary from a motor vehicle. You know what ICE tells them now? Sorry, not a priority. Go ahead and release him back into your community. That's where we're at right now.
That's insane. Because, I'm talking to Texas DPS. I mean, they can only enforce when somebody breaks a Texas state law. I asked them if we'd ever consider just passing a Texas state law that says it's illegal to cross our border from the southern border. I think that would probably pass the constitutional test. Just something to think about. I'm gonna text Governor Abbott about this.
Folks along those lines, because seriously, we're to the states are the last line of defense now. Yeah, clearly.
And Texas seems to be the only one taking it seriously. Right now, the crisis is in Texas, frankly.
Correct.
It's worth noting. One of the reasons for that is the Mexican state right across from Rio Grande Valley has now refused to take back any immigrants under Title 42. So that's not the entire country of Mexico. That's just one locality. That's why they're frankly seeing a crisis. That word gets out fast.
But that's going to grow, right? And it already started to grow because of sheer volume. Mexico's tapping out saying, we don't have the resources to do this. So in Tamaulipas area, families, with tender-age kids, they're like, well, I'm out. That's why today, the press secretary said today that, we're still, what was the phrase? We're still returning the majority of people. What a total spin. First of all, since January, they've released 11,000 illegal aliens to local shelters and bus stations along the southwest border. 11,000. And to say the majority, it's a barely now, because they're up to about, if I'm doing my math right, about 35-40% now of individuals they're encountering, they're actually bringing into their facilities. And the majority of those are unaccompanied minors and families, which they are releasing. Yeah. So again, it's just another spin, another series of misinformation they're trying to give the American people. And look, here's another key. These are my words. These aren't your words, but these are my words. I'm calling also what they're trying to do right now is a cover-up. So what they're trying to do is not just let Border Patrol release the illegal aliens right at bus stations and shelters right at the borders. Now they're actually getting ICE to be part of this, to bust them into the interior United States, in the interior of Texas. I've heard Chicago is a place now that they're actually going to bust these individuals to relieve the pressure along the southwest border, to make it not look like the magnitude of the crisis that it is by doing that. And FEMA actually, they're directing FEMA right now to give millions of dollars to non-governmental organizations, NGOs, to actually help facilitate busing these individuals into the interior United States.
Right. That's not going to Americans who need it.
Right.
And, these communities are getting hit hard. I was asking about how it's affecting communities down at the border. They were telling me, look, we've had 600, pursuits. That's 600 pursuits just for illegal immigrants. That's car chases. That's dangerous to the community. It overwhelms hospital systems, especially in COVID times. It's really just not fair to these communities. That's why you see Democrat representatives on the border actually speaking out against this. I'll give Henry Cuellar a lot of credit. He signed on to my bill that I have a bill that I just introduced last night, and he's a co-sponsor to just ask that Texas gets paid back for all the resources that we've delivered on the border over the past 10 years. It's not fair.
And I tell you, not to agree with that, but then I know this will be near dear your heart too. Is let's take a look at the men and women of CBP. right? So you start filling up these facilities, you start increasing the exposure risk of COVID, not just to the migrants themselves, but to the CBP personnel. We've already got multiple sectors that are already way beyond COVID capacity levels right now. I believe my last count was 5 that are well above capacity. And now, like I said, over 6,000 that are in custody right now. So now the exposure risks to the men and women of CBP are high. We've already lost 21 CBP personnel in the line of duty because of COVID. Now,
and they're not being vaccinated either. Like, they're not being prioritized for vaccinations either.
They're not. You know where they're getting it? State and local.
I know.
So
I asked them.
Thank God for the testing. Thank God for the warp speed vaccine process because some of them are getting that. And I think that's probably why we're not seeing astronomical numbers of the CBP workforce continue to be infected, as you're seeing the numbers in these open air congregate settings being overcrowded right now. All preventable. All preventable.
It's very frustrating. I've got to go, unfortunately.
Okay.
Here on the Hill, we're doing. I think we're voting. We're got meetings, whatever it is. I think we covered it all, though. I mean, that's the basics. What people need to know. All right. It's very simple. There's a crisis, number one, and it's totally preventable. Just do what the Trump administration was doing. That was a completely humane way to deal with this. It's very common sense. It's very frustrating, man. We were both on Hannity last night, and he didn't call me Ben this time, so I was really excited about that. Last time I was on, he's like, Ben. I'm like,
I only got one question.
I know. Well, that's always what it is. It's a fast show. But last time I was on there, he calls me Ben. I was like, you a big golf fan? You a big golf fan, Sean? He's like, it was funny. I think they cut it for the final segment. But anyway, he was asking, he was like, well, do they just want more illegal immigration? I'm like, yes. I mean, I didn't always believe that about Democrats. Obama deported a lot of people. He talked about the border a lot. All Democrats. I can find videos of all of them talking about how important the border is. And I think meaning it to an extent. And now they don't even try. I mean, it's just a complete flip. And I think they want more illegal immigration. I think they want to give them citizenship and vote for them. I don't know what else to think.
It's it. I tell you, the current bill, immigration, it's the most radical, progressive immigration bill we've ever seen. And when we think about what you just said, at least there was some pretense to secure our borders. And this bill is not even a pretense. They've gotten completely away from that. They have no desire to secure the border. Again, they want to remove the illegal part from illegal immigration. Again, reception centers on the front end, sanctuary countries on the back end. And I've been doing this for 30 years. And so nothing makes sense except what you just said. They see a perceived political benefit either through the census or a pathway to citizenship for every illegal alien. They think it's going to be a Democratic vote. Nothing else makes sense.
It's frustrating. Mark, thank you so much for being on. Wish we could talk longer, but hey, we can always do it again. Thanks for all you're doing. Thanks for being out there and getting the truth out to people. People need to hear it and understand what's going on.
You as well. Thanks for having me.